On Christmas afternoon, 10 minutes before my marriage changed shape forever, my wife's butler called me and said, "Mr. Price, I'm sorry. Don't come home." Walter Briggs had worked for Nora's family longer than Nora had been alive. He was technically the house manager. But the Whitlocks were old military money, the kind of family that kept silver polished even when nobody used it. So, everyone called him the butler and nobody corrected it. I was 2 miles from Whitlock House with a bakery box on the passenger seat and a paper bag of pharmacy cold medicine for Nora's mother on the floor. Snow had started dusting the windshield. My shift. Radio was still clipped to my coat because I had come straight from the County Emergency Operations Center after a water main break turned half of downtown Colorado Springs into a skating rink. "What do you mean? Don't come home?" I asked. Walter breathed once, slow and uneven. Behind him, I heard music, cutlery, and Nora's laugh. Not her polite laugh, not the one she used at formal dinners with colonels and foundation donors. This was the laugh she used before deployments back when she'd hook 2 fingers into the sleeve of my jacket and pull me into the kitchen because she didn't want to say goodbye in front of anybody. "I shouldn't be calling," Walter said. "But you deserve the choice." 10 minutes later, I parked at the back of Whitlock House with my headlights off. I didn't go through the front portico. That entrance belonged to portraits, garland, brass lamps, and family expectations. I took the service drive, the one I used when I came home muddy from repairing the carriage house furnace or hauling in groceries for Ruth Whitlock because no one else remembered she was supposed to eat before 7. The keypad beside the side door glowed blue. My code didn't work. I tried again, typing digits, my birthday. Nora had said it 9 years ago and joked that if she ever forgot it, I had permission to start worrying. The keypad flashed red. Inside, through the tall glass panes of the breakfast room, I could see the Christmas dinner table stretched under candlelight. Ruth sat at one end, pearls on, chin lifted. 2 of Nora's cousins were there. Colonel Harlan from Nora's professional circle sat near the fireplace. Walter stood in the doorway like a man bracing for weather. And Nora, my wife, sat beside D&E Rusk. D&E had one arm resting on the back of my chair. Not a random chair, mine. The one at Ruth's right hand, where I had sat for every Christmas since Nora brought me home from Fort Sam Houston, and told her family I was the man who had kept 3 wounded soldiers alive through a dust storm outside Kandahar. D&E wore a dark sweater, clean-shaven, handsome in the useful way some men are handsome when they know grief makes them interesting. His left hand was wrapped around a glass of red wine. His right wrist held my father's watch. For a few seconds, I forgot the snow. I forgot the bakery box. I forgot the cold medicine rolling against my boot. My father's watch was a battered Hamilton field watch from Vietnam. Not expensive, but irreplaceable. It had sat in the top drawer of my dresser wrapped in a blue cloth. Because I only wore it on days when I needed to remember I came from somebody steady. Nora leaned toward D&E and adjusted his cuff so the watch showed. Ruth lifted her glass. "To second chances," she said, smiling with all her teeth, "and to the people who understand what service really asks of a family." The table murmured approval. Nora didn't look toward the side door. She didn't know I was there. D&E did. His eyes moved to the glass. He saw me. He didn't smile. He was too careful for that. He only turned his wrist slightly enough for the watch face to catch the candlelight. That tiny movement did more damage than any speech he could have given. I stepped back from the glass before anyone else saw me. There are moments people imagine they'll handle with drama. They think betrayal comes with shouting, broken plates, a final sentence worthy of being remembered. In real life, your body usually handles it before your mind catches up. Mine went very still. My hands got careful. My breathing turned professional the way it did when I arrived at a wreck and saw blood on the pavement. Assess. Don't react. Don't create more casualties. Walter opened the side door from the inside before I could knock. His face had the gray-drawn look of a man who had already chosen a side and hated that choosing had become necessary. "I changed nothing," he said quietly. "Mrs. Price had the codes changed this morning." "Mrs. Price." "Nora, my wife." "Why?" Walter looked behind him. "Major Price said you'd agreed not to attend tonight. She said the evening would be easier if there were no misunderstandings." I almost laughed. Not because anything was funny, but because misunderstandings had apparently grown large enough to sit in my chair and wear my father's watch. "I didn't agree to that." "I know." The 2 words landed harder than I expected. Walter held the door open another 6 inches. "There's something else. I should have left." A smarter man might have gone back to the truck, called a lawyer, and preserved whatever dignity he had left. But the house had been my home, too. Even if Ruth had never fully believed it, I had patched its roof after the spring hailstorm. I had installed the generator transfer switch. I had carried Nora through that side door when she sprained her ankle on a ruck because she refused to admit pain in front of junior officers, so I stepped inside. Walter led me down the service hallway. The house smelled like cedar, roast beef, expensive candles, and the particular cold of rooms too large to heat properly. At the mudroom, a row of coats hung on brass hooks. Nora's dress blues coat was there. Ruth's fur-trimmed wool coat. A few civilian parkas. A green canvas duffel sat beneath them. D&E Rusk was stenciled across the side. Not a guest bag for dinner. A staying bag. Beside it sat a pair of men's boots wet from the snow, placed exactly where I usually kicked mine off after work. Walter didn't point to it. He didn't need to. In the library, the old mahogany table had been cleared of family photo albums and covered with presentation folders. At the top of the nearest folder was a photograph of a cabin under aspen trees, roof silvered by age. Porch rails I had sanded by hand. Split rail fence my father built the summer before his heart failed. Cottonwood cabin, my father's place near Buena Vista, my separate property, my childhood. The one thing from my side of the family that had never belonged to the Whitlocks. Printed beneath the photo were the words Rusk Retreat Initiative, a private recovery space for combat veterans and their families. Founding location, Cottonwood Cabin. My name appeared on the next line. Graham Price, supporting founder and property sponsor. The edges of the room pulled away from me. Walter stood near the door, hands clasped in front of him. Did Nora give you this? I asked. No, he said. Mr. Rusk left them out for the dinner guests. Mrs. Price asked me to set one at each place. I picked up the folder. My father's cabin looked wrong under glossy ink. Too clean, too available, like something already taken. Did she say I approve this? Walter's eyes moved toward the dining room. She said you were struggling with the idea because of your attachment to the property, but that you'd come around. She said you always did, once you had time. I put the folder back exactly where it had been. That sentence told me more than the watch. More than the locked keypad, more than D&E's duffel. You always did. That was the marriage Nora had come to rely on. Not a partnership. A delay before my consent from the dining room. D&E's voice carried through the hall, smooth, low, practiced. Graham's heart is in the right place, he was saying. He just doesn't always understand what men coming back from war need. Nora does. A chair shifted. Someone murmured. Sympathy. I had spent 12 months in a field hospital and fought each night trying to sleep without hearing helicopters in my dreams. D&E knew that. Nora knew that better than anyone. Walter reached for the folder. Do you want me to remove these? No. He stopped. Leave them where they are. For the first time since the phone call, Walter looked afraid I might go in there. Not violent. I've never been that kind of man. But there are other ways to ruin a dinner. Truth spoken too early and without proof can look like instability to people already prepared to doubt you. I took out my phone and photographed the folder. The cover, the page with my name, the page with the cabin address, the line that called me a property sponsor. Then I walked back to the mudroom and photographed D&E's duffel, his boots, and the keypad panel showing the failed access attempts under my username. Walter watched without interrupting. Is the security system still under the same account? I asked. Yes, you're the administrator. That was because I had installed the upgraded cameras and access logs after a break-in 2 years earlier. Nora had called it one of my over-prepared emergency management projects until it helped recover Ruth's stolen jewelry. Good, Walter said, softer. I'm sorry. I looked at him then. He was 70, maybe more. With one shoulder lower than the other from decades of carrying trays and luggage and other people's secrets. He had warned me because he still believed a household had a moral structure, even when the people who owned it didn't. You did the right thing. I left the way I came in. Nobody at the table called my name. Nobody rushed after me. The dinner continued behind glass. My absence already explained for me in the truck. The bakery box sat unopened. The frosting inside had smeared against the cardboard where I'd gripped too hard after Walter's call. I drove to a chain hotel near I-25, checked in under my county employee discount, and sat on the edge of the bed with the curtains open to a parking lot full of dirty snow. My phone lit up at 9:14. Nora, where are you? At 9:17, another message. Nora, Walter said you came by. Why would you sneak around instead of coming in like an adult? At 9:21, Nora, D&E is in a fragile place. Please don't make tonight about your pride. There it was. Not confusion, not apology. Management. I opened the security system app. My administrator access still worked. The guest code created that morning was labeled Doctor. The account history showed 7 entries in the last 3 weeks, all between midnight and 5 a.m., all through the side door. 2 entries were on nights I had been at overnight emergency activations. One was on the night Nora told me she was sleeping at Fort Carson because of an early briefing. I exported the logs. Then I changed my personal banking passwords, removed Nora's access to the credit card that was mine alone, and turned off the automatic monthly transfer I had been making into the Whitlock house maintenance account. It wasn't court drama. It wasn't revenge. It was the first practical line I had drawn in 9 years. At 10:03, I texted Nora back. I came home. My code had been removed. D&E was there with my father's watch. My cabin is being used in project materials without my consent. From this point forward, communicate with me in writing about the cabin, finances, and living arrangements. I stared at the message for a full minute before sending it. Then I sent one more. Do not use my name, my property, or my father's belongings for D&E Rusk again. Nora didn't answer right away. At 10:19, 3 dots appeared, vanished, appeared again. Finally, her reply arrived. You're misunderstanding everything. I looked at the exported security logs sitting in my email inbox. No. For the first time in a long while, I wasn't. I slept badly, but I slept. That surprised me. I thought betrayal would keep me upright all night, pacing, rehearsing speeches I would never give. Instead, my body shut down around 2 o'clock in the morning, still wearing jeans, phone on my chest, boots beside the hotel bed. When I woke at 6 o'clock, the room smelled like stale heater air and old coffee from the machine on the dresser. Christmas morning in a hotel is a strange thing. The lobby had a plastic tree near the elevators and a bowl of oranges beside the breakfast station. A family in matching pajamas tried to keep 2 children from touching the waffle maker. An older man read the newspaper with a Santa hat folded beside his plate, like he'd put it on for someone who hadn't arrived yet. I sat alone with burned coffee and pulled up the security export again. DR entered at 12:46 a.m. on December 4th, exited at 5:12 a.m. DR entered at 1:03 a.m. on December 11th, exited at 4:58 a.m. DR entered at 9:37 p.m. on December 19th. No exit recorded until 7:22 a.m. Each line looked harmless if you wanted it to. A guest, a project meeting, a veteran having a hard night, a family helping someone in need. That was the danger of Nora's version of things. It always borrowed just enough truth to stand upright. At 6:42, she called. I let it ring once, twice, 3 times. Then I answered. Merry Christmas, she said. The words came out brisk, almost corrective, as if she could restore the holiday by naming it. Merry Christmas. A pause. Are you really in a hotel? Yes. That's ridiculous. I stirred my coffee though I had already added too much sugar. My access code was deleted. You weren't supposed to come last night. I live there. You know what I mean? I don't. She exhaled sharply in the background. I heard a cabinet close. Then water running. The house was waking up. Coffee service. Leftovers. Ruth asking where her pills were because the pharmacy bag was still on the floor of my truck. D&E had nowhere else to go, Nora said. He's been dealing with things you don't understand. That sentence had done a lot of work in our marriage. Things you don't understand. It allowed Nora to build whole rooms I wasn't allowed to enter. I understand he was using a guest code after midnight while you told me you were on base. Silence. Not guilt yet. Calculation. You check the logs. I administer the system. You're making this sound ugly. It already looked ugly from the driveway. Her voice dropped. So, Walter really did call you? Yes. I'll handle Walter. Something in me tightened. Don't punish him for telling the truth. Graham, he works for my mother. And I'm your husband. Another silence. This one lasted long enough for the family in pajamas to leave the lobby before Nora spoke again. She sounded tired, and that almost worked on me. Nora tired had always been my weakness. Nora, after a field exercise, boots unlaced, shoulders low, letting the whole world see she was human only when the door closed. D&E is not what you're making him into, she said. He saved people. He lost people. He's trying to build something that matters with my cabin. We were going to talk to you. The brochures have my name on them. They were drafts. They were on the dinner table for family and Colonel Harlan. A small irritated breath. Harlan supports veteran recovery programs. He understands the mission. There it was again. The mission had seen bad ideas survive for years because somebody put the word mission in front of them. Mission could turn vanity into service, avoidance into sacrifice, and an affair into emotional triage. Did you give D&E my father's watch? I asked. Nora didn't answer fast enough. He admired it, she said eventually. I thought you wouldn't mind him wearing it for dinner. I closed my eyes. That was when pain arrived. Late and physical, not rage. Rage would have been easier. This was an ache under my ribs, the kind that made breathing feel inefficient. My father's watch isn't a costume piece for D&E's recovery story. That's not fair. No, it isn't. She tried a different tone then, softer, lower. The voice she used when she wanted me to remember us before this. Come home today. We can talk without everyone around. Is D&E there? He's staying in the guest suite until New Year's. Then I'm not coming. Graham. I'll arrange a time to collect my personal things in writing. That sounds like a lawyer. It sounds like a boundary. You're really going to do this on Christmas? I looked at the lobby tree, its lights blinking unevenly. You did it before dinner. She hung up, not slammed. Nora didn't slam things. She ended operations. At 8, Walter called. I no longer have a position, he said. I stood so quickly the chair leg scraped tile. What happened? Mrs. Whitlock said my judgment had become compromised by personal affection. Walter, I'm sorry. I expected it. His voice was composed, but I knew men like Walter. Pride was the last uniform they wore. Where are you? At the bus stop on Nevada Avenue. Stay there. By the time I pulled up, Walter had 2 suitcases, 1 garment bag, and a black umbrella. Though no snow was falling, he wore his dark overcoat and leather gloves. He looked less like a fired employee than a man leaving a post after a long siege. He got into the truck carefully. I didn't call you to cause trouble, he said. You didn't cause it. He watched the Whitlock neighborhood shrink in the side mirror. I've served that family through 3 funerals, 2 deployments, 1 bankruptcy scare, and more Christmas dinners than I care to count. Your wife was a decent girl once, I know. And Mrs. Whitlock was kinder before the general died. I waited. Walter folded his gloves in his lap. Mr. Rusk came into the house at Thanksgiving, not for dinner. After Major Price brought him through the side entrance, she said he needed privacy and that you were aware. I wasn't. I suspected as much. Why didn't you tell me then? He looked straight ahead because suspicion is a dangerous gift. If I was wrong, I'd have harmed your marriage. If I was right, I'd only be moving the harm into the light. That was fair, hard, but fair. I took him to a diner near downtown, one of the few places open Christmas morning. He ordered tea and toast. I ordered eggs I didn't want. The waitress called Walter, sir, without irony, and he thanked her like she had offered him a room in a palace. Do you have somewhere to go? I asked. My niece in Pueblo, but I won't arrive unannounced on Christmas. You can stay at my hotel tonight. No, I won't have you paying for my displacement. You lost your job because you warned me. I lost my job because Mrs. Whitlock prefers curtains to windows. That was the first thing that almost made me smile. Walter reached into his coat and took out a folded sheet of paper. I made notes before I left. Not gossip. Dates. Instructions given to staff. Guest room preparations. Deliveries. I thought you might need accuracy. I unfolded it. December 1st, Major Price requested East Guest Suite prepared for DR through New Year. December 3rd, Mr. Rusk delivered 3 boxes marked Rusk Retreat Initiative. December 8th, Major Price instructed staff not to discuss Mr. Rusk's presence with Mr. Price to avoid unnecessary conflict. December 20th, Mrs. Whitlock requested dinner place cards. Mr. Price not included. Mr. Rusk seated at family right. December 24th, Major Price asked that Mr. Price be told if he arrived. That dinner was private. My fingers tightened on the paper. Walter, I'll sign it if asked. That may put you in the middle of legal trouble. I've been in the middle of moral trouble for weeks. Legal trouble sounds cleaner. I folded the paper and slid it into the folder I had bought at the hotel front desk. At 10 o'clock, I called my sister Molly in Grand Junction. She answered on the second ring. Please tell me you're calling because Nora finally admitted her family's eggnog tastes like furniture polish. Hearing her voice nearly broke me. Molly had never trusted the Whitlocks, not because they were wealthy, but because they made generosity feel like an audition. I need to tell you something, I said. Her humor disappeared. Are you safe? Yes. Is Nora? Yes. Okay, talk. So I did. Not all of it. Enough. The dinner, D&E, the watch, the cabin brochure. When I said Cottonwood Cabin, Molly swore so loudly Walter looked into his tea. That cabin is Dad, she said. She knows that. Yes. Do you need me there? Not yet. That wasn't the question. I rubbed my forehead. I need you to send me the scanned deed copy from Dad's estate folder and the probate documents. Anything showing the cabin passed directly to me. Done. Molly. What? I don't want this to get uglier than it has to. She went quiet for a moment. Graham, people who count on your restraint often call it peace. Don't confuse the two. After we hung up, I sat in the diner booth while Walter finished his toast. At 11:32, a text came from Ruth Whitlock. Your behavior has distressed your wife on Christmas morning. Whatever disagreement you two are having, I expect you to resolve it privately and not involve household staff. I stared at household staff. Then another text arrived from Nora. Mother says the maintenance transfer didn't come through. The boiler contractor is scheduled for Friday. Please don't weaponize the house because you're upset. I had paid into that maintenance account for years. Because Whitlock House was always temporarily tight in ways that never affected Ruth's jewelry, charity lunches, or imported wallpaper. The house belonged to Ruth's trust. The pride belonged to Nora's family. The invoices somehow kept finding me. I typed carefully. The monthly transfer came from my personal account and was voluntary. I've stopped it pending legal and financial review. I'll pay obligations that are legally mine. Send documentation for anything else. Nora replied almost instantly. You're being punitive. No. I thought punitive would have been walking into dinner with the brochure raised over my head. Instead, I paid the diner bill, drove Walter to a respectable motel he finally agreed to let me cover for one night, and spent the afternoon gathering documents, the cabin deed, my father's will, bank statements, credit card records, security logs, photos from Christmas Eve, Walter's timeline. At 5:40 p.m., Nora sent one more message. D&E wants to talk to you man to man. I looked at it for a while, then I wrote, no. It was the shortest message I had sent all day. It also felt like the first honest one. The day after Christmas, the city went back to work with a hangover. Road crews scraped ice from intersections. Grocery stores marked down wreaths. The county emergency office smelled like wet boots and microwave burritos. I sat at my desk at 7:15 a.m. and tried to read a flood risk report while my marriage sat open in a folder beside my keyboard. By 8, I had 3 missed calls from Nora, 1 from Ruth, and 1 unknown number that left a voicemail. Graham, this is D&E Rusk. I know this is uncomfortable, but I think we'd all benefit from a calm conversation. Nora cares about you. I respect what you've done. I'd hate for a misunderstanding to damage something that could help a lot of people. His voice was perfect, not arrogant, not apologetic, reasonable in a way that invited witnesses. A man like D&E didn't need to say, she chose me. He knew how to place himself above the conflict and make the conflict look like your failure to rise. I saved the voicemail. At 9, my supervisor, Tessa Boone, knocked on my open door. You look like somebody fed you bad news for breakfast. Tessa was 52, former wildland fire operations. Blunt enough to sand paint. She had seen me work through blizzards, evacuation drills, budget cuts, and one sheriff who believed planning meant owning a louder radio. Family stuff, I said. Deadly or just expensive? Both, in spirit. She leaned against the doorframe. You need time. I need an attorney. Her expression changed. That kind of family stuff. That kind. She stepped in and closed the door halfway. I won't ask unless you want me to. Thanks. But if this touches work, tell me before someone else does. That warning mattered more than comfort. In my world, rumors traveled through volunteer boards, veterans groups, county commissions, and emergency services dinners faster than official memos. Nora and I moved through overlapping circles. If she had already framed me as unstable, I couldn't assume my job was outside the blast radius. At 10:30, I met Marisol Alvance. Her office was in an old brick building west of downtown above a physical therapy clinic and across from a coffee shop with bad parking. She was in her mid-40s with dark haircut at her jaw and the patient expression of someone who had watched many decent people arrive too late with too few documents. "You brought a folder," she said as I sat down. "I work in emergency management. That explains the tabs." I almost apologized for being organized, then decided not to. She listened without interrupting except to clarify dates. When I showed her the donor packet photos, she leaned closer. "Is Cottonwood Cabin titled only in your name?" "Yes. Inherited from my father before the marriage, 8 months after we wed. Nora has never been on the deed." "Any marital funds used for major improvements?" "Some roof repair 2 years ago came from joint savings. I paid most ongoing expenses from my personal account. We will separate those issues. The important point is that she cannot donate, pledge, lease, or authorize use of your separate property without your consent." "She hasn't signed anything that I know of." "Maybe not, but representation to donors can still create problems. You don't want people relying on false permission and then claiming you backed out after they committed money." I nodded. "Has money changed hands?" "I don't know. Find out." She tapped the photo of the brochure. "This line calling you a supporting founder is useful not because it proves everything but because it proves they were willing to use your name before consent was settled. We preserve first, then verify, then respond." That phrase settled me. Preserve, verify, respond. What about the affair? Marisol's expression softened, but her voice stayed practical. "Colorado is no fault. The court won't punish adultery because it hurts. But spending marital funds on an affair or on an unauthorized project can matter. Misrepresenting your property can matter. Locking you out of a residence may matter depending on legal occupancy. Her military status might create professional consequences, but family court is not going to become a morality stage." "I don't want a stage." "Good. Stages are expensive." I gave her Walter's notes. She read them twice. "Walter may be important. He was fired. That may become relevant, too. Don't coach him. Don't ask him to embellish. Dates and direct observations only. He won't embellish." "I believe you. I also believe frightened people sometimes confuse loyalty with helpful details. Keep it clean." By noon, Marisol had drafted a short letter instructing Nora and DNE to stop using my name, likeness, property, address, and cabin photographs in any Rusk Retreat materials until authorization could be established. She also requested copies of any documents where my name appeared. "Do we send it today?" I asked. "Yes. It'll make Nora furious." Marisol slid the paper into an envelope. "Mr. Price. She locked you out of your home on Christmas and put your inherited property in a fundraising packet. We're past preserving her mood." That sentence should have felt harsh. Instead, it felt like someone finally labeling the weather. After the meeting, I drove to Cottonwood Cabin. It took nearly 2 hours with traffic in mountain roads. The farther I got from Colorado Springs, the easier my lungs worked. The cabin sat beyond a narrow dirt lane under cottonwoods and bare aspens. The Arkansas River moved silver beyond the back fence. My father bought it when I was 12 with money from 30 years of electrical work and careful living. He said every man needed one place where nobody could schedule him. The winter air smelled like pine, cold dust, and wood smoke from a neighboring property. I unlocked the door and stepped into stillness. The cabin was small. 1 bedroom, 1 loft, a stone fireplace with a crack along the left side, kitchen cabinets painted green by my mother in 1998. A round table scarred by fishing knives, board games, unpaid bills, and 1 year of my teenage anger carved into the edge with a pocket knife. GP was still there. I ran my thumb over the letters. Nora had loved the cabin once. At least I thought she had. The first time I brought her here, she stood on the porch with coffee in both hands and said, "This is the first place I've been where nobody expects me to become more impressive." I believed her. I had built a lot of hope on that sentence. Now I opened every closet. No boxes from DNE, no project supplies, no signs anyone had entered that mattered. The cabin had been used on paper before it was used in person. My phone buzzed. "Nora." I let it go to voicemail. Then Ruth, then DNE, then Nora again. Finally, a text arrived. "Nora, did you send a legal letter to DNE?" I stood in my father's kitchen and typed. "My attorney sent notice regarding unauthorized use of my name and property." "Nora, you humiliated me." "Me, I protected my property." "Nora, it was a draft initiative. You didn't have to threaten people. Me, it was distributed at Christmas dinner. Nora, to people who care about veterans. Me, with my cabin listed as founding location. She didn't answer for 11 minutes then. Do you have any idea how much work DNE has put into this? I looked out the window at the fence my father built. Snow gathered along the rails. That was the moment I understood Nora still didn't see the center of the injury. She thought the problem was my resistance to DNE. She didn't grasp that she had taken the most private place I had and treated it as a resource waiting for better leadership. I didn't reply. Instead, I photographed the cabin interior, the exterior, the locked gate, the deed stored in the fireproof box, and the no trespassing sign my father had painted badly and proudly. As I was leaving, my boot hit something near the porch steps, a tire track fresh enough that the edges hadn't collapsed under new powder. Not for my truck, narrower, maybe a rental SUV. I crouched and took pictures. Then, I checked the lockbox near the back door where I kept an emergency key for Molly. It was empty. My father's place had not been entered, but someone had come prepared to enter it. I drove back to Colorado Springs with the kind of calm that does not feel peaceful. At 6:20 p.m., Molly called. I found something weird, she said. About the cabin, maybe. Dad's estate folder had your deed and the old survey, but there's an email in the scanned papers from 2 weeks ago. It went to the family email I still use for property taxes. Subject line says site confirmation. My hand tightened on the wheel. From who? Rusk Retreat Initiative. It says per Major Price's instruction. Please confirm available dates for January donor walkthrough. Graham. Why would they have the property tax email? Nora had access to that email. Years ago, when I was deployed as a contractor medic for a short training program, I gave it to her so she could forward a tax notice. Send it to Marisol. I already did. What does the email ask exactly? It says they're excited to include Cottonwood Cabin as the heart of the first recovery cycle. The road ahead blurred for a second under passing headlights, not because I was crying. I wasn't. Not then. Because I could suddenly see how far this had gone while I was paying bills, covering shifts, picking up Ruth's prescriptions, and trusting my wife not to turn my inheritance into a brochure. Molly's voice softened. Graham? Yeah, you still there? I'm here. Then stay here. Don't let them drag you into whatever version makes them feel noble. At 7:05, Marisol called. Did you authorize a site walkthrough? No. Did you provide the property email? No. Did you agree verbally through Nora? No. Good. I'm sending a second notice tonight. Stronger. I also want you to change every property lock, including the cabin gate. Keep receipts. Use a locksmith, not your own tools. So we have third-party documentation. Understood. One more thing, she said. Nora's attorney contacted me. She already has representation. The message claims you abandoned the marital residence, cut off necessary household funds, and are attempting to sabotage a charitable veteran support initiative out of jealousy. I let the words settle. There was the story Nora wanted told first. Marisol, I said. I want everything in writing. Now you're learning. After we hung up, I pulled into a gas station and sat under fluorescent lights while families in holiday sweaters filled tanks around me. My phone buzzed with a photo from Molly. A screenshot of the email. Below the message in smaller print was a proposed date, January 6th, 11 days away. They hadn't just borrowed the idea of my cabin. They were planning to bring donors to its door. I had become a version of myself I hadn't met. In Nora's version, I was jealous, possessive, and triggered by another veteran's pain. I had stormed around the house on Christmas Eve, frightened Walter into taking my side, and then retaliated by cutting off money Ruth needed to maintain the family property. I was not physically dangerous. Of course, Nora was too careful to say that where it could be repeated. I was simply not in a stable place. That phrase reached my office before lunch. It came through a chaplain I barely knew who stopped by the Emergency Operations Center under the pretense of asking about winter shelter coordination. He stood in my doorway with a paper cup of coffee and the mild eyes of a man trained to enter fires wearing slippers. I heard there may be some stress at home, he said. I looked up from a spreadsheet of generator fuel sites. From whom? People talk in a military town, they do. I'm not here to pry, but you came. He accepted that with a small nod. Major Price is respected. So are you. I'd hate for pride to turn something painful into something damaging. There it was again. Pride, the word people reached for when a man objected to being used, but hadn't yet shown everyone the receipts. I pushed my chair back. Chaplain, I appreciate concern. I'm not discussing my marriage at work. If anyone makes a specific allegation affecting my role, send it through formal channels. He looked surprised, then faintly relieved. That may be wise. It is. After he left, I closed my office door and added the encounter to the timeline. Marisol had told me to keep date, time, person, summary, no adjectives. At 2, Tessa knocked again. You need to know something, she said. County Commissioner's aide called asking whether you were still comfortable advising on the Veterans Winter Resilience Grant. I stared at her. That grant has nothing to do with Nora. Normally, no, but Rusk Retreat got mentioned in the same conversation. Apparently, DNE's people have been networking. DNE's people. His initiative had people already. What did you say? I said your professional assignments are determined by county leadership, not holiday gossip. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. If this gets messy, leadership may ask you to step away from anything veteran-related until it clears. Not because they think you're wrong, because institutions dislike fog. I know. She studied me. You want to tell me what's in the fog? I considered the answer. Tessa wasn't family. She wasn't Nora's circle. She also wasn't my therapist, but she was my supervisor. And she had given me the one gift Nora had not. A chance to speak before judgment hardened. My wife and her former boyfriend used my inherited property in fundraising materials without my consent, I said. I found out Christmas Eve. Tessa's jaw moved once. That's the clean version. Yes. The dirty version is worse. Yes. She nodded slowly. Document everything. Don't vent in writing. Don't use county systems. Don't make jokes in the break room. If someone approaches you about Rusk, send them to your attorney. I'm already doing that. Good. And Graham. Yeah. You look like you're trying to be so reasonable nobody can accuse you of being hurt. That's not sustainable. I didn't answer because she was right. That evening, Molly arrived with a duffel bag, a casserole dish, and the expression she used when she had decided not to ask permission. You look terrible, she said as I opened the hotel room door. Merry Christmas to you, too. She pushed past me. I brought food. It has vegetables because apparently betrayal doesn't prevent scurvy. Molly was 35, a school counselor, and capable of making grief feel offended by her efficiency. She put the casserole in the tiny microwave, inspected the room, and frowned at the open suitcase beside the bed. You can't live here. It's been 2 nights. 2 nights in a hotel after your wife put another man in your chair is already 2 nights too many. I'm looking at short-term rentals. You're coming to my place if you need to. In Grand Junction, my job is here. Then I'll help you find something here. She turned from the microwave. Have you cried yet? No. Have you eaten something? Have you considered doing one useful human thing before turning into a binder? I looked at the folder on the desk. It had grown to 3 sections. I'm handling it. Graham. Handling a situation and feeling it are different verbs. The microwave beeped. We ate at the small hotel table. The casserole was too hot in the middle and cold at the edges. Molly talked about her students, about a pipe bursting in her apartment building, about our mother insisting she didn't need help with her new medication organizer even though she had filled her Tuesday pill slot with cough drops. Then she said, Dad would have hated this. I know. No, he would have hated that Nora thought you'd eventually agree. That part would have made him quiet. My father's quiet had been a known weather system in our childhood, not anger, disappointment with work boots on. He liked Nora, I said. He liked that she made you happy. Those aren't the same thing. I set my fork down. Molly softened. I'm not trying to rewrite your marriage. I know she was there after you came back. I know she sat with you through the bad months. She did. That was the hardest part to explain to anyone who wanted clean villains. Nora had loved me once with a steadiness that saved my life. After my last contract medical deployment, when I couldn't sleep more than 90 minutes at a time, she would sit on the bathroom floor outside the shower because the sound of water covered too much silence. She never mocked me, never called me weak. She learned the difference between touching my shoulder and trapping me in a hug. For years, she had been the safest person I knew. People want betrayal to erase the good. It doesn't. It makes the good harder to carry. So, what happened? Molly asked. I leaned back. She became impressive. Molly waited. Nora always had pressure on her. Her father's name. West Point. Promotions. Being the woman in rooms where men waited for her to be either too hard or too soft. I admired her for fighting through it. But somewhere along the way, she started needing everyone near her to support the image. DNE fits the image. And you don't. I fix boilers. You coordinate disaster response at Whitlock House. I fix boilers. Molly looked angry enough to stand up and find someone before she could speak. My phone buzzed. Unknown number. I almost let it go, but Marisol had said not to ignore potential documentation. Graham Price, I answered. A woman's voice said, Mr. Price, this is Elise from the Broadmoor Veterans Wellness Fund. We received a notice from your attorney regarding Rusk Retreat. I'm hoping this is simply a misunderstanding. Molly froze across from me. I put the call on speaker and set the phone down. Elise, I can't discuss details directly. Please contact my attorney. I understand. It's just that Major Price assured us the property sponsor was fully supportive. I have not authorized use of my property. A pause. That's concerning. Yes. We were scheduled to visit the site January 6th. I did not authorize any visit. Another pause, longer. Mr. Price, were you aware your name is listed in the preliminary donor deck as a founding partner? Yes, that is part of the issue. Her voice lost some warmth. I see. Please send any materials you receive to my attorney. We'll do that. After I hung up, Molly whispered, they really did it. Yes. She stood and started clearing plates with too much force. Now it's not just Nora and DNE. No, it's donors. Military people. Maybe county people. Yes. So, what happens? I looked at the binder, the phone, the hotel curtains, the life that had become evidence. Now I stop defending my feelings, I said, and start defending the facts. At 9:30, an email from Marisol arrived. Attached were copies forwarded by the Broadmoor Veterans Wellness Fund. The donor deck was 26 pages long. Page 4 showed Nora in uniform at a veterans panel. Page 7 showed DNE standing near an American flag, head bowed, looking noble and bruised by history. Page 12 showed Cottonwood Cabin. Page 13 had a quote attributed to me. I believe healing starts where men can finally put down the weight. I had never said that. At the bottom of the slide was my name. Graham Price, former Army medic, founding property sponsor. I sat back in the hotel chair. Molly came to stand behind me. For once, she had no immediate sentence ready. Nora hadn't just taken my cabin. She had invented my blessing. The locksmith met me at Cottonwood Cabin before sunrise on December 28th. He was a broad man named Ken, who drove a van with a cracked windshield and listened to classic rock low enough to be polite. He didn't ask why I needed every lock changed on a property 2 hours from my listed address. He gave me a clipboard, noted the time, photographed the old locks, photographed the new locks, and wrote, "Customer requested emergency rekey due to unauthorized access concern," on the invoice. Marisol would like that. Third-party documentation, clean records. I should have felt safer when the new deadbolt clicked into place. Instead, I felt like I had locked the barn after watching smoke rise from the next county. While Ken worked, I walked the perimeter fence. The tire tracks I'd photographed had hardened overnight. Near the gate, I found a cigarette but pressed into the snow. DNE smoked clove cigarettes sometimes. I remembered because Nora hated smoke, but once defended it by saying he only did it when he was stressed. I photographed the cigarette but didn't touch it. Maybe it meant nothing. Maybe a hunter had stopped nearby. Maybe a neighbor's nephew liked imported cigarettes. Evidence, Marisol had said, was not whatever made your story feel complete. Evidence had to survive someone else not loving you. When the locksmith left, I went inside and built a fire. The cabin warmed slowly. Old places take time to believe in heat. I opened the kitchen drawer where my father had kept pencils, twist ties, batteries, expired coupons, and one orange-handled screwdriver that belonged nowhere, but always existed. It was still there. I held it a moment, then put it back. My phone buzzed. Nora. I let it go to voicemail. Then Ruth, then DNE, then Nora again. Finally, a text. Nora, we need to talk about what you're doing. Me, send it in writing. Nora, this writing-only thing is childish. Me, it protects both of us. Nora, protects from what? Conversation. Me, from revision. She didn't answer for 20 minutes. Then, Nora, D&E's project matters. He has donors, veterans waiting, therapists interested. You are turning a private marital problem into something that hurts people who served. I stood by the window while the message sat in my hand. That was how Nora always found the high ground. She put other people on it first, then climbed over them. Me, I am not stopping any lawful veteran support project. I am stopping the unauthorized use of my property, name, and family history. Nora, you're punishing me because you feel replaced. I typed 3 different replies and deleted all of them. Finally, I sent one line. My father's watch is to be returned to me through Marisol's office. That ended the exchange. At noon, Molly called to say our mother's assisted living account had rejected the scheduled supplemental payment. What supplemental payment? I asked. The one you set up after her insurance stopped covering the extra therapy sessions. It comes from the joint emergency account. Yes, it bounced. The cabin felt colder around me. How much is in that account? I don't know. I only got the facility email because I'm the backup contact. I logged into the bank from my laptop. The joint emergency account should have held $18,400. Not a fortune, but enough to cover unplanned medical travel and repairs. The practical surprises that ruin people who pretend love is enough. Current balance, $2,374.20. For a while I only stared at the screen. There were transfers I didn't recognize. $4,500 to Rusk Strategic Services, $3,200 to Summit Print and Design, $2,800 to Front Range Event Rentals, $1,750 to Aspen Table Catering. Smaller charges for web hosting, deposit fees, promotional photography, all within the last month. The account Nora and I built for emergencies had been feeding D&E's lunch. I called Marisol. She listened, then said, "Download statements immediately. Full transaction history. Don't move funds from joint accounts without advice. Do secure your personal income going forward." My mother's payment bounced. "I'm sorry. I can cover it from my personal savings. Do that if you can. Keep the receipt. We may seek reimbursement as part of marital spending review, but don't expect immediate recovery." I knew knowing the truth didn't make it easier. I paid the assisted living balance from my personal account, then sat at my father's table and let the anger finally arrive. It didn't come hot. It came organized. Line items, dates, amounts. Nora had not simply drifted into emotional confusion. She had spent money we set aside for family emergencies while letting me believe we were still making decisions together. The betrayal had learned accounting. That evening, I drove back to Colorado Springs and met Walter at a small extended stay motel where he had taken a weekly room despite my offer to pay for something better. He wore a cardigan instead of his house uniform, which made him look suddenly older. "I have a niece coming tomorrow," he said. "You needn't worry." "I'm going to worry anyway." "Then do it quietly." I dislike fuss. I gave him an envelope with cash. He looked offended before I even explained. "No, Walter. No, it's not charity. It's severance from the household that should have paid it. That household didn't get to distribute its shame onto you." I sat in the chair opposite him. "You warned me and lost your job. I made a choice. So did I." He looked at the envelope for a long moment. "What is this really for?" 2 weeks of food, gas, whatever you need until your niece comes." "I have savings." "I know. And pride." "I know that, too." His mouth twitched. "You're difficult for a man who appears mild. I've been told." He accepted the envelope, not gratefully, but formally. "Then I'll consider it a loan." A loan. With no interest. "Walter." He tucked it into a drawer. "I found something before I left," he said. My body changed before my thoughts did. "What?" "Not stolen. Found. It was in the library wastebasket, torn once, but not shredded. I thought it unwise to leave it there." He took a folded sheet from a worn leather portfolio. It was a draft letter on Rusk Retreat letterhead. "Dear founding supporters, we are honored to confirm that our first private recovery cycle will take place at Cottonwood Cabin, made available through the generosity of Major Nora Whitlock Price and her husband Graham Price, whose own experience as a combat medic gives him a personal understanding of our mission." I kept reading. The retreat would include 2 4-day donor observation weekends, 3 veteran pilot groups, and a family healing dinner hosted by Major Price. My cabin, donor observation weekends, family healing dinner. Walter watched me reach the end. "There's handwriting on the back," he said. I turned it over. Nora's handwriting. Graham softened before donor walkthrough. Frame his dad's legacy helping men like him. Do not let him make this about ownership. The last word had been underlined twice. Ownership. I read it again, though once had been enough. Nora knew exactly what the issue was. She had named it privately while denying it publicly. The room became narrow. Walter said, "I'm sorry." I folded the letter carefully. "No," I said. "This helps." It did not feel like help. It felt like a door closing somewhere behind me. That night, I did not go back to the hotel right. I drove without much direction until I found myself near Whitlock House. The driveway lights were on. Snow lay smooth across the lawn except for the tire marks of recent guests. Through the front windows, I could see the 12-foot Christmas tree in the hall. Nora and I had decorated it together for years because Ruth insisted the latter aggravated her hip, and Walter could not safely do the upper branches. This year, the top of the tree tilted slightly left. I knew exactly which branch was causing it. Third row from the crown, too heavy with glass ornaments. I had fixed it every Christmas by wiring the branch back to the trunk. No one had done it. That small wrongness nearly undid me. Not the affair, not the money, not the brochure. A crooked Christmas tree in a house that had used me until the details started showing. My phone rang. Nora, I didn't answer. She called again, then texted Graham. "Please just come home so we can talk like married people." I looked at the house like married people. Married people did not erase access codes. Married people did not seat another man in your chair and give him your father's watch. Married people did not spend emergency savings on a project with your name forged into its moral center. I drove back to the hotel for the first time since Christmas Eve. I cried, not dramatically, not for long, just enough that the grief had somewhere to go besides my paperwork. Then I washed my face, opened the laptop, and added Nora's handwritten note to the evidence folder. D.N.E. Rusk had built his second career on being almost true. That was what I learned from the first real background report Marisol's investigator sent us. He had served. He had deployed. He had been wounded, though not in the dramatic way his speeches implied. He had lost friends because anyone who spent enough time in uniform did. He had left the army as a captain, but not for the clean personal growth reasons he gave donors. There had been a procurement inquiry. Nothing criminal charged. Nothing that made headlines. Enough questions about vendor relationships and missing equipment that D&E resigned before the final administrative findings could harden into something permanent, almost true. He spoke at veteran panels, and every story contained real places, real losses, real acronyms, real grief. Then he stretched the frame until he stood closer to heroism than the facts allowed. Nora would not have fallen for an obvious liar. She was too smart for that. She fell for someone whose lies resembled the life she respected. On December 29th, Marisol called me into her office. "We have 3 developments," she said. "You'll dislike all of them. I appreciate the warning. First, Rusk Retreat has removed your cabin photo from its public website. That's good. It's cosmetic. The private donor material still circulated. Second, D&E's counsel claims your verbal consent was conveyed through Nora. I never gave it. I know. Third, Nora's attorney is pushing for a temporary agreement that allows her to remain at Whitlock House and asks that you not contact donors, military colleagues, or family, friends. She wants silence. She wants control of the narrative." Marisol slid a paper toward me. "This is the part you'll dislike most. They're suggesting your objections arise from emotional distress connected to your prior service." I read the paragraph once, then again. The words were careful. They did not call me unstable outright. They referred to understandable trauma responses, heightened possessiveness regarding inherited property, and misinterpretation of charitable intent. Nora had put my service on trial without filing anything in court. Marisol watched me. "Don't respond emotionally." "I'm not. You are. You're just doing it quietly." I set the paper down. "What do? We answer with documentation. We don't diagnose Nora. We don't attack D&E service. We address false representations, unauthorized spending, and property rights. Can we contact donors? As your attorney, I can send notices to entities that receive false materials. You personally should not campaign. If someone contacts you, refer them to me." I nodded. "Now," she said, "there is something else." She opened a second folder. Walter provided copies of staff instructions. One includes an email from Nora to Ruth and Walter dated December 20th. She writes that you were not ready to participate constructively and asks that Graham not be drawn into the Christmas announcement. Announcement. Yes, that word matters. The document showed Nora had not been improvising on Christmas Eve. The dinner was designed to move without me. Marisol turned the page. Attached to that email was a run of show. A what? A schedule for the evening. I looked down. 6:30 cocktails, 7:15 dinner. 8 o'clock Ruth toast. 8:10 DNE remarks. 8:25 Nora introduces retreat partnership. 8:40 Harlan invited to comment. 9 o'clock dessert. My wife had scheduled the moment my property became part of another man's future. Under 8:25, a note read, mention Graham's eventual role only if necessary. Avoid ownership framing. Emphasize healing and service. I stared at the word eventual. Marisol let the silence sit. This helps us, she said eventually. I gave a short laugh with no humor in it. Everyone keeps saying that. I know evidence often feels like being injured twice. That sentence found me more accurately than comfort would have. After the meeting, I drove to Walter's motel. His niece had arrived, a cheerful woman named Patrice, who looked at me with open curiosity and immediate suspicion until Walter introduced me. He's the husband, Walter said. Patrice's face softened and hardened at the same time. Oh, you're that poor man. Walter sighed. Patrice, what he is. I'm not sure I'm ready for a title, I said. She handed me coffee anyway. Walter had one more thing. A small black notebook where he recorded service vendors, deliveries, staff schedules, and apparently anything that disturbed his sense of order. He offered it to Marisol if needed. I won't give it to you directly, he said. Too much private household information. But if your attorney requests relevant pages, I'll comply. Thank you. He studied me over his tea. You must be careful of Mr. Rusk. I am. No, not because he is strong, because he is useful to people's stories about themselves. That was exactly it. D&E helped Ruth feel that the Whitlock name still gathered heroic men around the table. He helped donors feel generous. He helped Nora feel alive in the part of herself that wore dress blues and could not admit loneliness. He even helped strangers feel they understood trauma without sitting with anything messy. And me, I had become useful as the obstacle. That afternoon, D&E sent an email through counsel offering to meet at Marisol's office to resolve the cabin misunderstanding. In the spirit of veteran unity. Marisol forwarded it with one line, no meeting. Unless strategically useful, currently not useful. I almost enjoyed that. At 5:15, Nora came to my hotel. I didn't invite her. She must have guessed from credit card records or called enough places until someone confirmed. I opened the door because ignoring her in a hallway would create a scene for people who had paid for quiet holidays. She wore jeans, boots, and a gray coat I bought her in Denver 4 years earlier. Her hair was pulled back without uniform, without family table, without D&E nearby. She looked like the woman who used to fall asleep with one hand on my chest. That was dangerous. We need to talk, she said. Marisol told me not to discuss legal matters without counsel. I'm not here about legal matters. Then why are you here? She looked past me into the room, the suitcase, the laptop, the papers stacked on the desk. This is awful. Yes, I hate that you're here. You changed my code. Her mouth tightened. Because I knew you'd react badly. I reacted by documenting what happened and leaving. You're acting like I invited D&E into our bed. I looked at her. She looked away first, not enough to confess, enough to confirm there was a place in the conversation she would not walk. I don't know what you want me to say, she said. The truth would be new. That landed, her eyes sharpened. You want the truth? D&E reached out in October after the panel at Peterson. He was not doing well. He had this project, yes, but he was also isolated. I understood him in a way other people didn't. Did you sleep with him? Her jaw said that is not the center of this. It is one center. No, the center is that you are trying to destroy something that could help people because you're hurt. The center is my property being used without permission. Your property. She laughed once exhausted and bitter. God, Graham, you always go back to that. My father spent his life serving this country. D&E served. I serve. And you're guarding a cabin like it's a museum to your grief. There it was, not said in rage. Worse, said like something she had believed for a while. My father wired houses until his hands cramped. I said he bought that cabin without a family trust or a general's pension. He left it to me. Not to your father's legacy, not to DNE's project. To me. Her expression flickered for a moment. I saw the Nora who would have understood. Then she protected herself. You used to be generous. I used to be included. She wrapped her arms around herself. DNE makes me feel like I'm not constantly asking permission to care about things bigger than mortgage payments and furnace repairs. That one should have made me angry. Instead, it clarified the shape of the marriage she had been living in. I was the furnace repairs, the prescription runs, the emergency savings, the person who made sure the ground held while she looked toward bigger things. You didn't need permission to care. I said you needed consent to take. She blinked, her eyes shone, but no tears fell. I didn't think you'd say no. No, that was the whole tragedy. In 6 words, she waited for me to soften. I knew the pause. I had stepped into it hundreds of times. Nora pushed until she reached the edge of my anger, then trusted love to pull me back into usefulness. This time, I let the pause remain empty. I'll return the watch, she said through Marisol. That's humiliating. So was watching him wear it. She flinched then, a small real movement, but she recovered. I hope you're proud of what you're doing. I opened the door wider. I'm not proud. I'm awake. She left without another word. 10 minutes later, my phone buzzed with an email from Marisol. Subject, midpoint issue. Possible forged quote authorization. Attached was a PDF from one of the donors. A form giving Rusk Retreat permission to use my name, service history, and property image in preliminary materials. The signature line read, Graham Price. It wasn't my signature, but it was close enough to prove someone had practiced. I stared at the forged authorization until the letters stopped being letters and became a pattern of betrayal. Whoever signed it knew the slope of my G. The way I crossed the T in Price when I was writing quickly, the narrow loop in the H. It was not a perfect copy. It had too much pressure. My real signature relaxed halfway through because my hand got lazy. This one tried too hard all the way to the end, but it would fool someone who wanted to be fooled. Marisol had me come in the next morning. She brought in a document examiner on video call, a gray-haired woman named Dr. Pell, who spoke with the calm severity of a person who had spent 30 years telling people their dead fathers had not signed new wills. Initial review only. Dr. Pell said, not a final opinion, but I see hesitation marks, inconsistent pressure, and unnatural pen lifts. Would not treat this as genuine without further examination. Can we prove who signed it? I asked. Handwriting comparison can sometimes exclude or suggest. It rarely performs miracles. After the call, Marisol leaned back. This changes the tone. Forgery, potential forgery. We use careful language until we have more. Nora signed it. Marisol didn't indulge certainty. Maybe DNE, maybe someone used a scanned signature. We prove what can be proved. I hated that answer because it was responsible. What happens now? We send a preservation demand to Nora, DNE, Rusk Retreat, any design firm, and relevant donors. They preserve drafts, emails, metadata, signature files, and communications regarding your authorization. And if they don't, then consequences later. Not lightning today. I stood and walked to the window. Outside, a man was trying to parallel park a truck too large for the space. He failed twice, adjusted, then made it work by inches. That felt like the legal system. No thunder, just inches. I could post the packet, I said. Marisol didn't answer immediately. I could put it online. The donor deck, the fake signature, the cabin, DNE's background, Nora's notes. You could. People would know by dinner. Yes. Would that be illegal? Potentially defamatory if you stayed within proven conclusions. Potentially damaging to your divorce posture. Potentially harmful to veterans who signed on in good faith. Potentially satisfying for 6 hours. I turned. You think I shouldn't? I think you came here because you want someone to tell you not to become the version of yourself they're describing. That hit too close. I sat down again. Marisol's voice softened. Anger is not the problem. Direction is. We will respond hard but clean. Hard and clean. I repeated exactly so that became the rule. Hard and clean. By the end of the day, Marisol had sent preservation demands. She had notified Rusk Retreats Council that all use of my name, property, service history, and quotations must cease immediately. She requested original documents related to the authorization. She warned that any site visit to Cottonwood Cabin would be treated as trespass. I changed the cabin gate chain. I posted no accusations that night. I received a message from DNE, not through Council Direct. Graham, I understand you're hurt. I would be too, but you're aiming at the wrong target. Nora has carried more than you know. She felt alone long before I came back into her life. If you love her, don't make her choose between your pain and her purpose. I read it 3 times. Then I forwarded it to Marisol without replying. A minute later, he sent another. You and I both served. We both know healing takes sacrifice. This time I did reply. Do not contact me directly again. He responded. Understood. That was DNE. Always reasonable once the message had done its work. The next morning brought the first real consequence. Summit Print and Design. The company that made the donor deck produced metadata showing the fake authorization had been uploaded from Nora's personal email account on December 14th. The file name was price_authorization_final.pdf. There were earlier versions. Marisol requested them. Nora called me 7 times in an hour. I didn't answer. At noon, Ruth texted Graham. This legal escalation is unnecessary and cruel. DNE's initiative has brought hope to Nora during a difficult season. You are not the only person who has suffered in life. I typed nothing. Molly typed enough for both of us in a separate thread after I sent her the screenshot. Please do not let me near these people unless you want the kind of Christmas sequel nobody can monetize. Despite everything, I laughed a real laugh, short, rusty, surprising. That afternoon Walter signed an affidavit at Marisol's office. He kept the facts, dates, instructions, things seen and heard, no commentary, no adjectives. He looked dignified and miserable when he finished. I walked into the elevator. I'm sorry you had to do that, I said. I'm sorry it was true. The elevator doors opened before he stepped in. He said, Major Price came to the staff pantry on Christmas Eve before dinner. She was unsettled. I waited. She asked if I thought you would forgive her eventually. My throat tightened. What did you say? I said, forgiveness is not the same as permission. The doors closed. I stood there longer than necessary. That sentence followed me into the evening. At 7 o'clock, Nora finally stopped calling and sent an email. Graham, I understand why the authorization upset you. I should not have handled it that way. I believed I was reflecting what you would have agreed to if we had been able to discuss it without emotional pressure. That was wrong. But I need you to understand something. DNE's project gave me a way to feel useful outside the machinery of rank and evaluations. It reminded me why service mattered before it became politics, promotions, and men watching to see if I'd fail. You used to understand that part of me. I know Christmas hurt you. I'm not denying that. But if you keep pushing this through lawyers, you will destroy the project, damage my credibility, and make any future conversation between us impossible. Please meet me privately. I read it once. Then again, it was the closest she had come to admitting anything. Not the affair, not the spending, not the forged signature, but she admitted she had done wrong. Then placed the cost of consequences back in my hands, if you keep pushing. Not if I hadn't forged. Not if I hadn't locked you out. Not if I hadn't brought him into our home. I forwarded it to Marisol. Then I opened a blank document and wrote a reply I did not send. I wrote about the night Nora pinned captain bars on her uniform and cried because her father wasn't alive to see it. I wrote about the time she held my hand under a restaurant table because fireworks outside had turned my spine to ice. I wrote about how proud I had been of her, how small I had made myself in rooms where her family measured worth and rank and legacy. I wrote that I had never asked her to choose between purpose and me. I had only expected her not to turn my life into material for another man's. Come back. The letter ran 3 pages. Then I saved it in a folder called Unsent. At 9:12, Marisol replied to Nora on my behalf. Mr. Price will not meet privately. All substantive communication should proceed through counsel. At 9:40, Nora sent one last message directly to me. There won't be anything left of us after this. I sat in the hotel room with the laptop glow on my hands for once. I did not comfort her about a truth she had created. The first mediation took place in a conference room with bad art and excellent soundproofing that seemed appropriate. Divorce, I learned, is often less dramatic than people imagine and more humiliating than they expect. There are no orchestra swells, no judge leaning forward with moral outrage. Mostly there are folders. Water bottles, financial disclosures, and adults pretending not to hear each other breathe through walls. Nora arrived with her attorney, a narrow man named Peter Halverson, who wore a navy suit and the expression of someone who preferred problems billable and contained. Nora wore civilian clothes, but everything about her posture remained military. Shoulders squared, chin level, grief locked somewhere behind procedure. She did not look at me when she entered. I was grateful and hurt by that in equal measure. Marisol sat beside me. "Remember," she said quietly, "goals, not speeches. My goals are property protection, financial accounting, personal belongings, separation terms, and communication boundaries." "Good." The mediator, a retired judge named Ellen Harrow, moved between rooms. She had silver hair, red glasses, and the patience of someone who no longer needed to impress anyone. She began in our room. "I've read the preliminary submissions," she said. "This is a marriage case, not a criminal case, not a military tribunal, not a public inquiry. We are here to establish temporary structure and reduce further harm." I liked her immediately. Marisol outlined our position. I would not return to Whitlock House while DNE resided there or while my access remained controlled. I would continue paying obligations legally tied to me. I would not fund Ruth's trust property. Cottonwood Cabin was to be excluded from any project, visit, promotion, or discussion. Nora was to account for expenditures from the joint emergency account. My father's watch and personal belongings were to be returned through counsel. The mediator listened, made notes, and went to Nora's room. We waited. Waiting in legal processes is its own punishment. It gives imagination too much oxygen. When Ellen returned, her face revealed little. "Major Price agrees the watch should be returned," she said. I felt Marisol glance at me. "She also agrees the cabin should not be accessed pending resolution." "Pending resolution?" Marisol asked. Ellen nodded. "She maintains there was an understanding that the property might be used in a limited capacity. There was no such understanding." I'm relaying. Marisol made a note. "What about the project materials?" she asked. "Major Price states she believed Mr. Price would support the project once properly briefed. She acknowledges materials were premature." Premature? That word tried to put a suit on theft and the authorization. Marisol asked. Ellen removed her glasses. "That is more complicated. It's either authentic or not. Major Price says she did not intend to forge his signature. She says she used a scanned signature from prior household documents as a placeholder and believed final consent would be obtained before formal distribution." I stared at the table. A placeholder. My name had become office formatting. Marisol's voice remained even. "The document was distributed to donors. Major Price acknowledges that was a serious mistake." "Does she acknowledge uploading it?" "Yes." I closed my eyes briefly. There was the verification. Not full accountability, but enough. Ellen continued regarding expenditures. "Major Price states the funds were used for a project she believed would benefit the veteran community and indirectly the marriage's shared values." I opened my eyes. Shared values had apparently cost $11,600. Marisol said the emergency account was designated for family medical and household emergencies. Mr. Price's mother's care payment failed because of those withdrawals. The mediator's pen paused. I was not aware of that. Nora was. Ellen went quiet. Then she stood. "I'll return." This time the wait lasted 35 minutes through the wall. Once I heard Nora's voice rise, not words, tone, controlled anger losing its grip. Marisol reviewed notes. I drank water. My phone sat face down. When Ellen came back, she looked slightly more tired. "Major Price will agree to replenish half the withdrawn emergency funds within 30 days. Pending final property division, half." I asked. Marisol touched the table lightly. "Wait." Ellen went on. "She will also provide a full accounting of all withdrawals related to Rusk Retreat or Mr. Rusk. Mr. Rusk is to vacate Whitlock House within 7 days. That was the first thing that made me look up. 7 days? I asked. Yes. Does Nora agree? Yes. I knew enough not to mistake that for victory, but I could feel the shape of consequence entering the house at last. What about my belongings? I asked. Ellen checked her notes. You may collect personal items Saturday at 10 a.m. Walter Briggs may attend as neutral inventory witness if willing. Walter doesn't work there anymore. Major Price agreed. I almost asked why. Then I understood. Nora trusted Walter's restraint. Even after firing him, she knew he would not perform for either side. The mediator leaned back. There is one more issue. Major Price requests that you refrain from contacting her command. I looked at Marisol. Marisol said, we have not contacted command. We reserve the right to report misuse of military status or government affiliation if relevant to donor representations. Ellen nodded. Understood. I'll relay that no agreement is reached on that point. After the mediator left, I whispered, can we report eventually if appropriate? Not impulsively. I'm not trying to ruin her career. I know. I'm trying to stop being ruined quietly. Marisol looked at me for a moment. That's a better sentence than most legal briefs. At 4 o'clock, the temporary agreement was drafted. Nora and I sat in the same room to sign. It was the first time we had faced each other across a table since before Christmas. She looked exhausted, not destroyed. Nora did not give anyone that much access, but the space around her had changed. The confidence that people would accept her framing had thinned when the mediator stepped out to copy documents. Nora spoke without looking at me. I didn't know about your mother's payment. I believed her. That was another cruelty of the situation. Nora had not intended that specific harm. She had simply stopped thinking about any practical consequence that did not support D&E's project. I know I would have covered it with what the emergency account held. Her mouth tightened. I deserve that. I said nothing. She looked at me then. D&E will leave the house. That's good. You think I'm choosing him? I studied the woman across from me. Her hands were clasped tightly, thumb pressing into thumb. I knew those hands. Scar on the right index finger from a broken mug in our first apartment. Pale line on the wrist from a training accident. Wedding ring still on. I think you already chose a version of yourself where I was easier to use than to face. Her eyes stung. That's not fair. Maybe not. It's what I think. The mediator returned. We signed. No one shook hands outside. Snow had melted into gray slush. Nora's car was parked 3 spaces from mine. For a moment, we walked in the same direction like any couple leaving an appointment, tired and ordinary. Then D&E stepped out from beside her SUV. He shouldn't have been there. His own attorney would have told him not to be. But maybe he needed to see the result of his work. Maybe he needed Nora to leave with him watching. Maybe men like D&E only trusted control when they could stand near it. Nora, he said. She stopped. I kept walking. Graham, he called. I turned because running from my own name had become boring. D&E lifted both hands slightly. Peaceful. Witness-friendly. I hope you know this isn't what I wanted. I looked at him. This man who had worn my father's watch and turned my cabin into a slide deck. No. I said, you wanted it easier. His expression changed just enough to show me the sentence had landed. Nora whispered, D&E, don't. I got into my truck and closed the door. As I pulled out, I saw them through the windshield. Nora was speaking sharply now. D&E was listening with his head angled in that careful, wounded way. For the first time, I wondered if Nora was beginning to see the performance. Not enough to save us, but enough to ruin the fantasy. The donor meeting was scheduled for January 6th. In a private room at a downtown hotel, it was not supposed to be dramatic. That was important. Marisol made it clear that we were not attending to confront Nora, expose an affair, or satisfy my need to see D&E embarrassed. We were attending because multiple organizations had received materials falsely naming me and my property as foundational support. The meeting would proceed. Rusk Retreat would present. Then Marisol would deliver a written notice and statement to the entities present. You will not speak unless asked a direct factual question. She told me. I can do that. You think you can? I want you to practice. So, we practiced in her office like I was preparing for a deposition. Did you agree to provide Cottonwood Cabin? No. Did you authorize use of your name? No. Are you opposed to veteran recovery programs? No. Why are you objecting now? Because my name, service history, and separate property were used without my consent. Are you doing this because of marital conflict? No. The lack of consent exists regardless of marital conflict. By the 10th repetition, the answers felt less like defense and more like ground beneath my feet. The hotel meeting room had beige walls, a long table, a coffee station, and a projector screen showing the Rusk Retreat logo. About 14 people were present when we arrived: donors, 2 nonprofit representatives, a therapist from Denver, Colonel Harlan in civilian clothes, and 3 people I recognized from local veterans organizations. Nora sat near the front. D&E stood by the projector speaking to a woman in a camel coat. He wore a navy blazer and open collar shirt. No medals, no obvious signals. D&E understood subtlety. He looked like a man who had done hard things and wanted to do kind ones. When he saw me, his face remained composed. Nora did not. She looked first at me, then at Marisol, then at the folder in Marisol's hand. A flush rose up her neck. Not fear, anger, shame, maybe both. D&E walked toward us. "Graham," he said quietly, "this is a private meeting." Marisol stepped forward. "I'm Marisol Vance, counsel for Mr. Price. We notified your attorney we would attend for the limited purpose of correcting unauthorized representations." D&E kept his voice low. "This isn't the forum." It became the forum when the materials were distributed to these participants. A few heads turned. D&E smiled politely. "We plan to address the site change today." "Excellent," Marisol said. "Then our statement will be brief." He held her gaze half a second too long, then returned to the projector. Nora stood and came to me. "You didn't have to come personally," she whispered. "Yes, I said I did. This will humiliate both of us. I'm not here to discuss us." Her eyes searched my face, maybe looking for the husband who would step outside and absorb one more injury to spare her public discomfort. He wasn't available. The meeting began at 9 o'clock. D&E opened with gratitude. He spoke about isolation after service, the difficulty of reintegration, the need for quiet spaces where veterans could be seen without being studied. He was good. I hated that he was good. He used no cheap theatrics. He never exaggerated in ways that could be easily attacked. He made people lean in. Then he advanced to the slide titled Pilot Location. It was no longer my cabin. Now the slide showed a generic mountain landscape, probably stock photography beneath it. "Initial site under review due to private family considerations." Marisol noted it. "One note," D&E continued, "as many of you know, our first proposed location involved property connected to Nora's family through marriage. Out of respect for an ongoing domestic matter, we are identifying alternate sites." Domestic matter, that was the phrase he chose for unauthorized property use. Marisol raised her hand. D&E paused. "I'd prefer to finish the presentation. This relates directly to the slide." The room shifted, not dramatically. People adjusted pens. Coffee cups stopped halfway to mouths. Curiosity has weight. D&E nodded with visible restraint. "Go ahead." Marisol stood. "I represent Graham Price, who is present." Several attendees received earlier materials identifying Mr. Price as a founding property sponsor and Cottonwood Cabin as a confirmed retreat site. Those statements were inaccurate. Mr. Price did not consent to use of his name, military history, inherited property, cabin address, or property image. He did not sign the authorization circulated with those materials. Cottonwood Cabin is not and has never been available to Rusk Retreat. No one spoke. She placed envelopes on the table. These letters include formal notice to cease use of all such materials and to preserve documents related to their creation and distribution. Mr. Price supports lawful veteran services. He does not support misrepresentation. Then she sat down. It took less than a minute. That was the counterstroke. No shouting, no accusation of adultery. No Christmas dinner replay. Just a clean blade placed exactly where the structure was weakest. The woman in the camel coat opened her envelope first. Colonel Harlan looked at Nora. Nora looked down at the table. D&E put both hands on the podium. "I appreciate the clarification," he said, voice controlled. "As I stated, we are moving forward with alternate sites." A man from one of the veteran organizations raised his hand. "Was donor money accepted while the cabin was listed as confirmed?" D&E's mouth tightened. "Preliminary commitments were made, not site-specific restricted donations." The therapist from Denver asked, "Who signed the property authorization?" D&E glanced at Nora. There it was, small but visible, the transfer of blame. Nora saw it, too. "I handled the preliminary packet," she said. Her voice was steady, but something underneath it had cracked. "You signed for your husband?" the therapist asked. "I used a scanned signature as a placeholder before final consent." The phrase sounded worse spoken aloud than it had on paper. Colonel Harlan leaned back slowly. The woman in the camel coat closed her folder. D&E stepped in. Major Price acted in good faith under the belief. Nora cut him off. Don't. One word, not loud, not theatrical, but it changed the air between them. D&E stopped. Nora looked at me then. For the first time since Christmas, I saw no argument prepared in her face, only recognition arriving late, and finding the room already occupied. Marisol touched my sleeve. Time to leave. We stood. As we reached the door, Colonel Harlan spoke. Mr. Price. I turned. He rose halfway from his chair, formal without making a show of it. I'll review the materials. That was all. It was enough. In the hallway, Nora followed us out. Graham. Marisol said. Major Price. Substantive communication should go through counsel. I know. Nora's eyes stayed on me. Please. One sentence. Marisol looked at me. My choice. I nodded once. Nora swallowed. I didn't think he would let me stand there alone. That sentence did not ask forgiveness. It did not even fully understand itself. But it was the first honest thing she had said without using my pain as evidence against me. I answered carefully. He didn't make you sign my name. She took that like a physical impact. No, she whispered. He didn't. Then Marisol and I left. By noon, 2 donors had paused commitments. By 3, Rusk Retreat's website was offline for revisions. By 5, Colonel Harlan's aide had requested copies of materials through proper channels. Not from me, but from the organizations involved. Marisol said that mattered. Institutions preferred paper trails that did not look personal. At 6, D&E sent one final direct message before apparently remembering counsel existed. You've destroyed something good because you couldn't bear not being central. I forwarded it to Marisol. Then I did something I had wanted to do since Christmas. I opened the drawer where I had put Nora's 3-page unsent letter, the one full of grief and memory, and I read it once more. Then I printed it, folded it, and placed it in an envelope. Without addressing it. Not to send, to bury the part of me still trying to explain love to someone who had mistaken it for eventual consent. Nora was not punished all at once. Real consequences rarely arrive with cinematic timing. They come in scheduled calls, delayed replies, polite cancellations, and people who still smile but stop making introductions. Rusk Retreat lost its largest preliminary donor 2 days after the meeting. The Broadmoor Veterans Wellness Fund paused consideration pending governance clarification. A local therapist withdrew from the pilot program. Summit Print and Design sent Marisol every draft it had retained, including the version with my cabin photo, the forged authorization, and Nora's email approving distribution to limited trusted supporters. Colonel Harlan did not call me. He didn't need to. On January 10th, Nora was asked to provide an explanation to her command regarding whether her rank, image, or professional relationships had been used to support a private initiative without proper review. That was not a court-martial. It was not the kind of explosive consequence people write into cheap stories. It was worse for Nora in a quieter way. It was scrutiny. Nora had built her adult life around being above reproach. She could survive hardship, exhaustion, and criticism. But scrutiny of judgment touched the nerve beneath the uniform. She called me that night from an unknown number. I answered because I was tired and because some part of me still knew the rhythm of her breathing before she spoke. It's me, she said. I know I'm not supposed to call directly. Then don't. I need 5 minutes where you're not a legal position. I almost hung up. Then I remembered Marisol's rule. If communication happens, do not discuss settlement, property, or legal strategy. Keep it narrow. And if manipulated, walk away. 5 minutes, I said. Nora's breath shook once. D&E left. I said nothing. He took the files he said were his. Some of them weren't. His attorney says all communications should go through counsel. He told Ruth he had become a distraction to the family. That sounds like D&E. I defended him. Yes, I defended him to you. Yes. Her silence had weight. I thought he understood the part of my life you couldn't. I stood in the small rental kitchen I had finally moved into, staring at a sink with a slow drain and cabinets painted landlord beige. What part was that? The part where I'm tired of being needed for practical things. It was an ugly answer. It was also honest. I needed you for more than practical things. I know that now. I didn't say that, knowing now had poor timing. She continued. D&E made everything feel important, not like bills and repairs and my mother's appointments. He talked about healing, legacy, service. He made me feel like I was still becoming someone. And I made you feel what? Responsible. The word landed softly because it was true and unfair at the same time. Marriage is responsibility. So is rank. So is family. Nora had wanted the honor of all three without the boredom of maintenance. I was responsible too. I said, I know. No, you know it as a fact now because numbers are involved. I'm not sure you knew it when it was just my time. She did not defend herself. That frightened me more than another argument would have. I saw the account, she said. The emergency fund. Yes, you emptied it for him. I told myself I was investing in something we'd both be proud of. My mother's therapy payment bounced. I'm sorry. I believe that. She cried then quietly. Nora hated crying where anyone could hear. So the fact that she didn't mute the phone told me she was too tired to manage presentation. I'm not asking you to come back. She said. Good. The word came out faster than I expected. She absorbed it. I deserve that. I'm not trying to punish you. You keep saying that through lawyers because when I said things as your husband, you translated them into obstacles. Another breath. I don't know who I am if this is who I became. For a moment, the old reflex rose in me so strongly I had to grip the counter, comfort her, stabilize her, tell her she was still good beneath the damage, build a bridge she could cross without getting her boots wet. But that reflex had helped build the room we were in. That's something you'll have to answer without using me. I know. Do you? I'm trying. Her voice was small in a way I had rarely heard. Not helpless, stripped of command. I should go, I said. Graham. Yes. Did you ever stop being proud of me? The question hurt because the answer was not clean. No, I said. I stopped trusting what you did with it. She made a sound that might have been agreement or grief. We ended the call. I documented it afterward because the new version of my life required even sorrow to have timestamps. A week later, my father's watch came back through Marisol's office. It arrived in a padded envelope wrapped in the same blue cloth from my dresser. There was no note. That was better. A note would have tried to make the return carry meaning it could not hold. I wound the watch and set it on my rental kitchen table. It ticked unevenly at first, then found its rhythm. Molly came that weekend to help me move out of the hotel completely. She brought plastic bins, a label maker, and 2 opinions about every object I owned. This chair is tragic, she said. It reclines. So does despair. We loaded boxes from storage, from the hotel, and eventually from Whitlock House under the terms of the agreement. Walter attended as inventory witness. Returning to Whitlock House should have been the hardest part. It wasn't. The hardest part was discovering how little of myself was there. My clothes fit into 6 boxes. My tools took more, but those had always belonged to work. Books, documents, a framed photo of Nora and me at Garden of the Gods, taken before her promotion party. My old field jacket, a ceramic mug Ruth always hated because it had a chip near the handle. D&E's duffel was gone. The Christmas tree still stood in the hall, dry now, needles gathering on the floor, the top still tilted left. Nora was not present. Ruth was. She stood near the staircase in a cashmere sweater, one hand on the banister. I hope you understand, she said, that no mother enjoys watching her daughter suffer. I sealed the box with tape. I don't imagine she does. You have made your point. No, I've protected my life. Ruth's mouth tightened. You were always welcome here. I looked around the hallway at the portraits, the garland still brittle over the doorway, the side keypad where my code had failed. Ruth, I said, not unkindly. I was useful here. Walter, standing by the inventory list, lowered his eyes. Ruth did not answer. Maybe she couldn't. Maybe somewhere behind family pride, she knew the difference. When we finished loading the truck, Walter signed the inventory sheet. As he handed me the copy, he paused. The tree, he said quietly. The upper branch is still wrong. I saw. You always fixed it. I know. He looked toward the hall. Leave it. So I did. Final mediation took place in March when snow still clung to shaded curbs, but the sun had started lying about spring. By then my life had developed rough edges that were beginning to feel like shape. I had a short-term rental with a bad sink and decent light. I cooked more than I ordered out because eating alone was less depressing when the meal involved a knife and cutting board. Molly called every Sunday. Walter had moved to Pueblo with Patrice, but visited Colorado Springs twice to provide statements and once to bring me tea I did not know what to do with. Nora and I communicated almost entirely through attorneys. The financial accounting showed $17,926 in marital funds directed to Rusk retreat expenses or D&E adjacent costs. Nora agreed to reimburse half immediately and the rest through property settlement credits. My personal credit card had no unauthorized charges after Christmas because I had cut access fast enough. Cottonwood Cabin remained fully mine. Rusk Retreat dissolved as an entity before Valentine's Day, replaced by a vague statement from D&E about reassessing service models. D&E left Colorado, Arizona, someone said, or Texas. Men like D&E often disappeared into states large enough to hold reinvention. Nora received a formal counseling memorandum related to judgment and use of professional image in private nonprofit promotion. Not career-ending, not nothing. Enough that her next promotion board would see a shadow where her record had once been clean. I did not celebrate that. I thought I might. Some mean part of me wanted to feel satisfaction when the consequences finally reached the uniform she had used as armor. Instead, I felt tired. Nora's career had mattered to her before D&E, before the lies, before the Christmas table. Watching it damaged did not repair me. Marisol noticed. "You're allowed not to enjoy this," she said before the session began. "That sounds inefficient. Divorce is very inefficient grief." The mediator placed us in separate rooms again. But the final issues were narrow: reimbursement schedule, personal property, mutual non-disparagement, tax filing, health insurance transitions. Nora would retain Whitlock House occupancy under her mother's trust, which I did not contest because I had no legal or emotional desire to fight for rooms that had locked me out. At noon, Ellen Harrow came into our room. "Major Price would like to speak directly before final signatures," she said. Marisol looked at me. "Your choice. I recommend counsel be present." "Present is fine." Nora entered 5 minutes later. She looked thinner. Not dramatically, just less armored by certainty. Her hair was shorter, cut just below her jaw. She wore no uniform, no jewelry except her wedding band. I noticed it immediately and wished I hadn't. She sat across from me for a few seconds. Neither of us spoke. Then she took off the ring and placed it on the table, not toward me, just between us. "I kept thinking," she said, "that if I found the right way to explain it, you'd understand how I got there." I waited, but explanation isn't repair. Marisol sat beside me, pen still, face neutral. Nora looked at her hands. "I did have an affair with D&E. The sentence entered the room without ornament. I had known. Of course, I had known. There are facts the body accepts before documents prove them. Still, hearing it named changed the air in my lungs. When I asked, "November, not October. Not after Christmas. November. Was he in our house?" "Yes. Guest suite." At first. Marisol's pen moved once. Nora swallowed. "I'm not going to dress it up. I did enough of that." "Why? Tell me now." "Because the agreement doesn't require me to, and because you deserved one answer that wasn't forced out by paperwork." I looked at the woman I had married 9 years ago. Nora had stood in a courthouse in San Antonio wearing a blue dress because we couldn't afford the wedding Ruth wanted and my deployment schedule didn't care about centerpieces. She had laughed when the clerk mispronounced her middle name. She had kissed me in the parking lot under a brutal Texas sun and said, "We'll build something practical and stubborn." We had. Then she mistook practical for disposable. "Did you love him?" I asked. She looked toward the window. I loved what I felt like around him. It was the most honest answer she could have given. "That's not the same." "No. Do you love me?" Her eyes filled, but she didn't look away. "Yes, but not in a way that protected you from me." That sentence almost broke something I had worked months to stabilize. Nora wiped her cheek quickly, annoyed with the tear. "I'm not asking you to reconsider." "Good." Her mouth trembled once. "You're very fast with that word now." I learned late. She nodded. I wanted to say I'm sorry without adding a reason after it. I waited. "I'm sorry, Graham. For D&E, for the cabin. For the signature, for the money, for your father's watch. For letting my family treat you like a support system instead of a person. For making you prove harm before I would admit I caused it." The room felt too small. I had imagined apologies before, in the hotel, in the truck, at the cabin. Some furious version of me had wanted one so badly it felt like hunger. Now that it sat across from me, I discovered it could not do what I once hoped. Thank you, I said. She closed her eyes briefly. That's it. What else should there be? I don't know. Neither did I. Forgiveness, maybe. But forgiveness is not permission. Walter had been right. I hope you get help. I said, real help, not D&E's version. I started. Good. I also told my mother to stop contacting you. I noticed. She didn't take it well. No. A faint almost smile touched Nora's face and vanished. Then she said, do you hate me? I thought about lying. Then I thought about being kind. Then I tried for truth. No, but I don't want a life with you anymore. That sentence did what shouting never could have. It ended the negotiation no one had named. Nora looked down at her ring on the table. I don't know how to walk out of this room. Probably the same way I walked out of the house. I said, one practical step because there isn't a better one. She gave a small broken laugh. That sounds like you. It is me. We signed the agreement at 2:17 p.m. By 2:29, Nora's attorney had packed his files. By 2:34, the mediator wished us both steadiness, which was better than happiness and more plausible. By 2:40, Marisol shook my hand. You did well, she said. I feel awful. That doesn't mean you did poorly. In the hallway, Nora stood near the elevator for a moment. I thought she might ask for a hug. She didn't. Maybe she knew I would refuse. Maybe she had finally learned not to ask me to absorb pain so she could leave lighter. The elevator arrived. She stepped inside. The doors began to close, then stopped as someone else got on from the lobby level. An ordinary interruption. A man carrying a printer box. Life, uninterested in our ending. Nora looked at me one last time. Take care of the cabin, she said. I will. The doors closed. Marisol stood beside me, ready. I wasn't. But readiness had stopped being the price of action. Yeah. I said, let's go. The next Christmas, Walter called me at 4:12 in the afternoon. For one strange second, seeing his name on the screen put me back in the truck with the bakery box, the failed keypad, and the snow beginning to cover the windshield. My body remembered before my mind had time to reassure it. I answered from the porch of Cottonwood Cabin with a mug of coffee in one hand and a strand of outdoor lights tangled around my boot. Walter, Mr. Price, he said. Formal as ever. I'm calling to inform you that your sister is attempting to make gravy without supervision from inside the cabin. Molly shouted. Snitch. I leaned against the porch rail and laughed. A year had not made everything simple. That would be a lie. And I had worked too hard for truth to decorate the ending. The divorce finalized in May. Nora transferred the last reimbursement payment in August. D&E's name disappeared from Colorado veteran circles by summer, though occasionally someone forwarded me a flyer from another state where he was consulting on trauma-informed leadership. I deleted those messages. Other people's future mistakes did not require my constant attendance. Nora remained in the Army. Her career slowed but did not end. In October, she sent a letter through Marisol, not asking for anything. She wrote that she had moved out of Whitlock House and into a small apartment near base. She wrote that Ruth was furious, then lonely, then quieter. She wrote that she had returned to therapy and had started volunteering with an established veterans organization where she was not allowed to lead anything for 6 months. She wrote, I confused being needed with being meaningful. Then I punished you for being steady. I read the letter twice. Then I placed it in a drawer. I did not reply, not because I wanted to hurt her, because some doors become dangerous if you keep proving they still open. Cottonwood Cabin changed slowly. I repaired the fireplace crack in June, replaced the porch rail in July. In September, Tessa and 2 county volunteers helped me clear defensible space for wildfire season, and she declared my shed less tragic than expected. Walter visited in October and reorganized the kitchen in a way that made me feel both grateful and mildly invaded. By December, the cabin had become less of a relic and more of a place. Molly arrived Christmas Eve with groceries, 3 wrapped gifts, and our mother, who complained about the mountain road until she saw the river through the back window and decided maybe my father had not been entirely foolish. Walter came Christmas morning with Patrice, who brought sweet potato pie, and told me I look less like a court exhibit than last year. We did not host a retreat. Not officially, not with brochures, donors, or a logo, but twice that fall, men I knew from the county and old service circles came up for a weekend because they needed somewhere quiet. We fixed the fence, burned food, sat near the river without making anyone explain why sleep was hard. Nobody took photos. Nobody called anyone a founder. Nobody turned pain into branding. Healing, I learned, did not always need a program. Sometimes it needed a working porch light, a spare bed, and people who understood that silence could be company. On Christmas afternoon, snow began again. The cabin smelled like roasting chicken, pine, coffee, and the faint metallic heat of old radiators. Molly was in the kitchen arguing with Walter about gravy thickness. Patrice was teaching my mother a card game and losing on purpose badly enough that my mother noticed and became offended. My father's watch sat on my wrist. It still ran unevenly if I forgot to wind it. That felt right. Some things keep time imperfectly and remain worth keeping. I stepped outside to untangle the lights before dark. The same strand had defeated me for 20 minutes. Every time I freed one loop, another caught on the porch nail. A year earlier, I might have kept at it until my hands went numb because leaving a job half done felt like failure. Now I stood there, looked at the mess, and said, "Good enough until tomorrow." Walter opened the door behind me. "Your sister says dinner in 10 minutes. Does she mean 10 actual minutes or 10? Molly minutes? Based on the gravy situation, I'd estimate 22. He stepped onto the porch, coat buttoned, posture erect against the cold. For a while, we watched snow gather on the fence. "I never thanked you properly," I said, "for the gravy warning, for the first warning." Walter's face changed just slightly. "Ah, you said don't come home." I did. I thought about that sentence for a long time. I regretted the phrasing. "Don't." He looked at me. "You were right, just not in the way either of us understood." The wind moved through the cottonwoods, bare branches clicking softly. "I did come home that night," I said. That was the problem. I came back to a place where everybody had already decided I didn't belong unless I was useful. Walter folded his hands over the porch rail. "And now?" I looked through the window. Molly laughing too loudly. My mother cheating at cards. Patrice pretending not to notice. Warm light on old cabinets my mother painted decades ago. A crooked stack of plates. The orange-handled screwdriver still in the kitchen drawer because some forms of disorder were inheritance. "Now I know the difference," I said. The door opened again and Molly stuck her head out. "If you two are out here having a meaningful man conversation, pause it. The chicken is resting and Mom is accusing Patrice of fraud." Walter straightened. "A serious allegation." "Extremely." He went inside. I stayed one more moment out across the yard. The porch light shone on the snow. Not grand. Not impressive. No columns. No polished silver. No place cards arranged according to rank and usefulness. Just a cabin my father had left me, a door I could open with my own key, and people inside who did not need me to disappear so the evening would be easier. My phone buzzed once, a message from an unknown number. For a moment, I wondered if it was Nora. A new number, a holiday weakness, a memory looking for a door. It wasn't. Tessa had sent a photo from the county office, a coffee mug on my desk that read "Preparedness is romantic." Below it, she wrote, "Merry Christmas. Also, your January flood plan is due Monday. Freedom has limits." I laughed and put the phone away. Inside, Molly yelled my name again. I took one last look at the falling snow. Then, I opened the door and went in. Not because someone had allowed me to, because it was mine.